want to talk about Wes Moore. We talked about this morning a little bit, but we're lucky enough to have the reporter, Andrew Kerr, who's now written two great investigative pieces about Governor Moore. And I'll say some of what I said this morning to repeat myself, but to say for the first time to those of you who didn't watch the morning meeting. I got nothing against Wes Moore. I used to be on Morning Joe with him. He's an impressive guy. He's a smart guy, incredibly well liked within the party. This is not me with any vendetta against Wes Moore. But even before Andrew's two pieces, this is his second one, sorry, my earpiece is showing again. It's clear to anyone who pays the least bit of attention to Governor Moore's history that, like many politicians, he embellishes his background, right? Says things that relate to the truth but aren't strictly true. And I know if you love Wes Moore, you're a Democrat, you'll say the current president of the United States lies about everything, not just about his background, but lies about public policy, lies about things he said. He'll say on a Thursday, the sky is red. And then the next day he'll say, the sky is blue. And I never said the sky was red. So I'm not saying that Wes Moore is as big a liar as the president. But here's what I am saying. First of all, this president, like Bill Clinton, escapes from things, including lies, like nobody we've ever seen. So if you're just talking about can Wes Moore be elected president, lying like he seems to be, the answer is not. Well, Donald Trump lies a lot and he got elected president, so of course Wes Moore can. That's just not the case. I give you John Edwards. I give you plenty of other examples of people whose presidential campaigns were derailed by things that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump would laugh at. That's just a immutable law of our lives, folks. Not everybody can survive the same things. So that's number one. Number two, Wes Moore is a pretty young guy. He's well known to a lot of you, but he's not well known throughout the universe. And so there's a rule in politics involving controversy. If you're super well known, people know a lot about you, and then there's some negative information, it's a much lower percentage of what they know about you. So if they know a lot about you, 100%, they know a lot, and then something negative happens, that negative is in the context of all the other things they know about you. If you're not very well known, and if Wes Moore runs for president, he's just not going to be very well known because he's not been on the national stage like this. And it turns out that he's embellished a lot of his record in meaningful ways. It's going to be a very high percentage of what they know about him. And the third thing I want to say about it extends beyond Governor Moore. And we'll get to the specifics in a minute. Everybody thinks, oh, he's run for Maryland governor. He's been on the national stage. He ran a big foundation. He must be scrutinized. No. Until you run for president, and then a new level, until you're the nominee of your party, the scrutiny is just nothing. You can be the governor of a giant state or a medium state or a small state. You can be a senator. No, it's just the way it works. Just the scrutiny is different. And what's happened here is Andrew first wrote a story about what Wes Moore said about his credentials as an academic scholar of terrorism and the relationship he had with Oxford. Okay, and it was an incredible piece. We talked about it here on the show. And he people can say the Washington Free Beacon right-wing publication hit job. No. Andrew did an incredibly responsible job, and frankly, if I were his editor, I would have hyped the piece up more. I would have been bolder in how I characterized the discrepancies, and I'm confident that he and his editor decided to show restraint, decided to say we're not going to open ourselves up to accusations that this was shoddy reporting or agenda-driven reporting. Okay, and if you're a professional observer of presidential politics, and you read Andrew's first story, you would have noted that Governor Moore's team didn't make the governor available to explain all these discrepancies about his claims about being one of the foremost experts of terrorism and other things about his academic background. They didn't make the governor available, and they just said this is a right-wing hit job from a right-wing publication. They did not engage Andrew's specific questions. And if you're an experienced observer of investigative pieces about politicians with presidential aspirations, you know full well that if they had good answers to Andrew's very solid questions, they would have given them. And instead, they went with Bill Clinton's normal playbook of saying politics of personal destruction. Governor Moore is going to be focusing on the good people of Maryland, and this is just a hit job, same old hit job. Politicians of both parties do that, and politicians of both parties embellish their resumes. But Andrew's piece was written in the context of many stories in the past about Governor Moore embellishing his background, where he grew up, what kind of work he's done, a whole bunch of things, too many to list practically. Okay, so when that piece ran, I said, I wonder if the Washington Post is going to write a piece about this, or the New York Times, because they write a lot of favorable pieces about Wes Moore. I wonder if when Wes Moore goes on MS Now or CNN, as he does regularly, or Face the Nation, amongst the questions will be, well, Governor Moore, what about this piece about your background? What do you say? Best I can tell, no. Unsurprisingly, the dominant media wasn't interested in following up the Washington Free Beacon's very good story, seemingly solidly reported. And now Andrew's done it again. Andrew's written another piece. This is about a story that Wes Moore tells all the time about his great-great-grandfather. And Andrew's going to come on in a moment and talk about it, and our guests will be here. They can join in the questioning, and then you all have an opportunity to ask questions too or make comments. But Governor Moore's staff in the article, same response, same thing. Right-wing hit job, obsessed with Wes Moore. You know, this is a political agenda. And the reporting in it is so careful. My hat's off to him. This is just such a great case study of how political journalism works and how the biased media works. It's just staggering. And it's about Wes Moore, who I'll say for the fifth time today in public, I like Wes Moore. I respect what he's accomplished. Incredible guy. But his Patty Loveless called it trouble with the truth. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. And is it a compulsion to not tell the truth about his biography? Is it because he doesn't think his actual biography is impressive enough? I don't know what it is, but the pattern is quite clear. Andrew, welcome and congratulations on another great piece. Have I gotten anything wrong so far? If I have, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Tell me if I've gotten anything wrong.
No, I think you're on point. Thank you so much for the kind words and for having me back on the show.
All right, so here, Nomi's coming in too. Thank you for being here, young lady. Appreciate your participation. Thank you for coming back. Andrew, while I bring Chris Johnson in as well, just walk people through what has Governor Moore said over the years about his great-grandfather, and what did you find in your reporting that casts doubt on the truthiness of what Governor Moore has said?
Yeah, so Moore, this was like the central aspect of his 2022 stump speech. He told it all the time. His great-grandfather was a prominent preacher, African-American preacher in Charleston in the 1920s in South Carolina. When his grandfather was just 6 years old, the great-grandfather's preaching got on the wrong side of the KKK and had to flee South Carolina. They were exiled to Jamaica. They had to leave under cover of darkness one fateful evening. The grandfather, who was very young when this happened, the whole family decided we're done with America, but the grandfather decided, I'm going to come back to this country that cast me away because of the color of my skin, where he eventually raises Wes Moore, who makes history as Maryland's first elected Black governor. So it's an inspiring story. It's just the historical
cinematic. It's
right.
Cinematic. Yeah.
The historical record just tells a different story.
Okay, before you tell the different story, Chris Johnson is also here, president of the American Energy Leadership Institute, Republican strategist, and Nomi, of course, Democratic strategist. Thank you both for being here. Andrew's gonna explain what he found in his reporting. Then he's going to explain briefly what Governor Moore's team responded, and then Nomi first. Then Chris, I'm going to want to ask you both to ask Andrew whatever questions you wish about any part of this story. Andrew, now say what you found, and then how the Moore team reacted.
Yeah, so I found Moore's great-grandfather's name was the Reverend Josiah Johnson Thomas. He preached at a church in Pineville, South Carolina. It's about 60 miles north of Charleston, from 1922 to December of 1924. During this time frame, the bishop of the Episcopal Church of South Carolina, a guy named William Guery, who's well known as a racial equality activist, reported that the white community of Pineville held this particular church in very high regard for the work that it was performing for the Black community. And in 1925, which is just after the great-grandfather leaves for Jamaica, he reports that the quote colored work at this particular church was quote in the most prosperous condition. So the first aspect of Moore's story, that the KKK was targeting a preacher at this church, just falls apart. Everything indicates that the white community actually really liked the work that this church was doing when Moore's great-grandfather was preaching there. Second of all, in early December of 2024 in Jamaica, a prominent pastor by the name of Reverend Young unexpectedly died. 3,000 people attended his funeral. The governor of Jamaica wrote in a telegram saying, "I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to your funeral." This guy was a big deal, and he died unexpectedly. 1 week later, Moore's great-grandfather receives a formalized transfer from South Carolina to Jamaica, according to church records that I reviewed at the Episcopal Archives. And this indicates a formalized process that required sign-off from multiple parties. And then when he arrives in Jamaica, one of the first things that happens is that he's appointed to succeed the late Reverend Young and take over his position. So what actually happened here was that a prominent Jamaican pastor unexpectedly died, a position opened up, and within a week, Moore's great-grandfather was making his plans to return to Jamaica, which was his home country. And when he returned to his home country, he took over for that late pastor, and Jamaican newspapers reported simply that he had labored in the States for a number of years and decided to come back to Jamaica to serve his own people. There's an extraordinary amount of documentation on the great-grandfather. It was like really, I was able to track him from when he first arrived in the United States in the early 1900s. He went to school at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. He preached at a church in Georgia, and then he went up to South Carolina. He got married and had kids along the way, including Moore's grandfather. And then he worked at this Pineville church before he left back for Jamaica. So an extraordinary amount of reporting on the guy, contemporary, but nothing indicating the core central elements of Wes Moore's story, that he was this racial equality preacher, that he was targeted by the KKK, and that he had to escape America under cover of darkness. There's just no evidence to support that at all.
Right. Okay. What you asked the more people explain the discrepancy. Here's all this public record. What did they say in response?
They didn't address any of the reporting, and they just strongly insinuated that I was a racist for asking. They said, "Hey, why don't you go ask the KKK what they were up to in the 1920s?" Which, I mean, I'm so glad I work for a news outlet that's not intimidated by cheap tactics like that. And also, I talked to a historian of the KKK. In the 1920s, there's three eras of the KKK, and I just found this really fascinating. The 1920s, the KKK was it was the most mainstream version of the organization, like awful organization, and there were debates at the time, that this is not a good group. But the primary victims of the KKK in the 1920s were white people that they viewed as being engaged in immoral activity. So adulterers, people that were violating prohibition. The KKK certainly engaged in violence against Black people. That happened. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a nice time being a Black person in the South, certainly. But the version of the KKK that is best defined by racial strife, by indiscriminate racial violence against Black people, that's the third KKK that arose out of that arose in the 1950s. This isn't me saying it. I quote a research paper and a historian that says this, and I just find it to be really, really interesting. It's certainly plausible that this could have happened to Wes Moore's great-grandfather, but when there's so much documentation on his life and his time in America, but none of it points to, it actually tells the opposite story, that he was working at a church that the white community liked. It's just, it's not an acceptable answer from Moore's team just to say, "Oh, you're a racist for daring to even question this story." It's just not acceptable. Wes Moore is, so many aspects of his biography are coming under question now, and I think a large reason why he gets away with that is because he just frankly he does play the race card, like that. He's a very charismatic Black man, and you just can't question the stories that he presents. So as far as like family lore, I think it's important to note that he writes about his great-grandfather in his 2010 book, The Other Wes Moore. That was his bestseller that kind of like propelled him to the national stage. He does not mention this story about the KKK running his great-grandfather out of America in that 2010 book. It first appears in his 2014 book when he's getting closer to running for politics. So for me, that was what was kind of what spurred me to look into this, is that we can see that the story materializes at a certain date.
Andrew needs to go in a moment. I can't think of a member of the two-way community I would rather have here to ask about this. My friend Ray Marcano lives in Ohio, one of the best, most fair-minded journalists I've ever met. Ray, welcome in. Unmute. Tell folks what's on your mind about this, and if you got a question for Andrew, I'd welcome it.
A question, a comment, and a question. I'll start with the comment. And that is, I think that, politicians lie. We know that. But when you make dishonesty a part of your identity, that speaks to character. And I think there are now questions about his character. As much as I personally like, I don't know him personally, but as much as I like Wes Moore and his politics.
Yeah.
Question for Andrew, though. I read the story. I think it's a fantastically reported story. However, this question about family lore hit me in the face like a bowling ball. Because I know in my family history, for example, there are all kinds of stories that have come out that I've now found out to be false. And I've repeated those stories over and over and over again. So my question is this: did you or your editors ever consider putting in a line or two in that story that says, look, he wouldn't talk. He's accused me of being a racist, but we have to acknowledge that family stories in history change and change repeatedly? And if
I think
not, why not?
we do have a line in there that that is, yeah, I'll just quote from the stories from the story. Many families tell larger than life stories about their forebears that wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but your typical family tree fabulous isn't preparing to run for president. I think that's the difference here.
Ray,
And I
does that,
apologize because
does,
that went right over my head.
yeah,
It's
okay.
fine.
Yeah,
It's a long
okay.
story.
It is a long story. I remember the sentence because when I read Andrew's stories now about Wes Moore, I'm reading them as like I'm a professor at Columbia Journalism School. I'm reading it to say, did he do everything he could to be fair? And so that sentence jumped out at me because Ray, that speaks to exactly your point. But I could see, because it is a long story, I could see if you missed that sentence, why, or paragraph, why you'd raise the question you did.
Can I make one quick point on that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have done this a long time ago, but I do think that it's still very early, and this is probably when they're doing that. I mean, knowing it's a crowded primary potentially, and if he is going to run, probably should have done it many years ago. But you know, just to throw that out, it's still a little bit
Yeah.
early.
Well, Nomi, my leading suspect have been the source is Wes Moore himself, who said, we got to get all this out early. So I'm going to give Andrew, no, just kidding. Ray, if
Yes, sir.
if Andrew's story as written had appeared in the New York Times, how would the reaction be different?
Oh, it'd be major national news. Not only would it be major national news, but I think in some of the more Black-centric publications, you would read some stories and some opinion pieces on how his comments are offensive to
Yeah,
Black America.
yeah,
Because there is, if in fact he is willingly telling a dishonesty, he's willingly lying about slavery and about his grandfather, there is nothing, I shouldn't say nothing, there are very few things that make people in the Black community more angry than telling a fib about your ancestors and all of the pain that they went through, because the pain is real.
yeah. I'm just saying that if he does run for president, and I believe he won't because of all this stuff, honestly, it's my gut feeling. I believe if he runs for president, these things are going to be raised by other Democrats, because Wes Moore is an extremely appealing candidate. George Clooney's for him, for goodness sakes. He's won the Clooney primary. But I'm just telling you, a guy who I remember when Mayor Adams claimed he was a vegetarian, didn't eat fish at all, and they found salmon in his refrigerator, and he said, "Oh, it's my son's salmon." I remember saying, if a guy will lie about salmon, he'll lie about anything. And if a guy will lie about where he grew up, what kind of upbringing he had, about his great grandfather, about his academic credentials, it's just too much. And if he runs for president, I don't know how he's going to answer this. Just because when the New York Times writes this story someday, and to their credit, they did write a story. Andrew, right? They wrote a story about him in the Medal of Honor. Is that what it is? Right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did the story
Yeah.
on the Bronze Star last year.
Bronze Star. So to their credit, they wrote a story very similar to Andrew's, where they looked at the documentation and they looked at what Wes Moore said, and it didn't make any sense. And he practically acknowledged that one, practically. But anyway, Andrew, grateful to you for coming back. I know you need to go, but very grateful to you for being part of sharing your story with us and our community. And I hope everybody will go read it. Andrew, where can they read it?
Freebeacon.com.
Yeah, go to freebeacon.com and read it, and just read it and say, did Andrew do everything he could to report this out with facts? Is it some right-wing hit job, or is it a very solid investigative reported piece with documents to Andrew, the credit of Andrew's editors? They let him spend a lot of time on this, reading documents, putting them in context, reading about the wider history. There are very few news organizations in America that do anything like that. Was it in service of doing a negative piece about a prominent Democrat? It was. But he's the governor of Maryland. As Andrew said, he's talked about as a presidential candidate. It's a great piece of journalism, and I recommend it to you. Andrew, thank you. Cozy Earth pajamas available to you now. A famous pajama set, bamboo pajama set, it was sold out over the holidays. And probably many of you were clicking on the thing over and over again, hoping they'd come back in stock. They didn't, but they have now. And members of the two-way community, well, you can get one for free. Buy one, get one free of their bamboo pajama set. Maybe Valentine's Day gift if you'd like. And they say they won't offer it any other time. Just a couple more days. Go to cozyearth.com. Promo code two-way BOGO, buy one, get one. Two-way BOGO at cozyearth.com. Get 2 pajama sets for the price of one, designed to drape beautifully and sleep cooler than cotton. If you don't have any Cozy Earth stuff, a good opportunity to try it, to see what all the fuss is about. Because there's a lot of fuss about it, because Cozy Earth helps turn simple moments at home into opportunities to feel cared for and comforted. My son's in the next room, swaddled in his bubble cuddle blanket. If I tried to take it away from him, I shudder to think what he would do. CozyEarth.com, promo code two-way BOGO. They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America. And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and Two-Way Tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.